The plan, to be honest, like, had always been to like go pro, as is, you know what I mean, kind of, I guess, is the common narrative, but like very much so, like that was the commitment, that was the game plan. And so that being the case, the focus was on, going to school, D1 specifically, into the States, for a long time. And the parents challenged me as well, when I said, okay, this is the commitment, I'm serious about it, into junior high, probably grade 7. They're like, if you're serious, you need to really start buckling down, in the schoolroom, whatever the case is. And not to say I wasn't. I kind of strapped down into it more so, like grade 7, grade 8, like, cool, like this is what I want to do. And then kind of being in that process as well, I was like, okay, well, like if I want to be at this high level, I want to be at the best, like I want to play with the best people at the highest level. I probably need to go, about it a little differently. Like I can't just pop into the States, be like, cool, like I want to play D1, like university. I need to be there probably in high school early, so that I'm with these people, competing with these people, and like in the system, and understanding how things work. But also, again, like, I mean, everything kind of we talked about, right? You need to compete to get better. And so that means your environment needs to be better, and that means the people that you're with directly in practice and everything else needs to challenge you. You need to be uncomfortable every day. And so I was like, okay, like I gotta really level up and take this seriously. Like, what does that look like for me to go somewhere else? And there had been kind of a couple people kind of through the grapevine that we knew about, like that had gone to school or had done other things, like not like Sacred Heart or whatever, but like out of the province type of deal. And so we were kind of digging into that, and kind of wasn't really in until I finished up at Goresbrook, and then did 1 year at Citadel. So I played that whole year, which was an interesting season, right? Being a rookie, the norm is you don't get to play, definitely not starting so much. But that was kind of that first year in terms of, the game plan was, okay, I need to get to the States. So, have to go and double down very much so in terms of like what the training is and what everything else is. So like I spent a lot of the junior high years in that headspace, and so...
Yeah, because you would have had to compete at the highest level to get more playing time, to get more visibility, to then record your highlight tapes.
Very much so.
To get that stuff out there, right? So you had to make a big impact in a grade 10 year, which very few athletes do.
Very much so. So it was interesting, right? Because especially like, and it wasn't so much like, oh, I like football, doing like, as I said, like this was the love as well as track. So it was in terms of like competing and training, like that was not a question. Up early, running home from school in terms of, just to get the cardio, running at night, training, like it was the process very much so. And so to kind of go into Citadel and get kind of those like second half reps, but still to be able to put up the same numbers as the first team in like less time, it was interesting kind of because it was, you build kind of the camaraderie, being like the younger and you're with some of the other guys, but then also being able to get into the games and have an impact at that level, you know what I mean, to when we hit playoffs, like I was able to start, and did well, and we ended up winning the championship thing, and obviously we had a great team, and shout out to obviously at that point, O-linemen, most important people, in any of those pieces, but like it was a big push that season, and I think in terms of like pressure or whatever, it was definitely an environment where it was like, yo, if I'm serious about this, like I have to do this. I have to do this. Or it was like, yo, if I'm serious about this, like I have to do this. I have to do this. And not talk about doing it, but really just do the work. And at the time, my mom was pregnant with my little brother. So she obviously was supporting and stuff like that, but, a family friend really was kind of helping us finesse and have those conversations in terms of like the recruiting. So, had kind of put out, had the highlight tape and done all that stuff. But it ended up kind of being in a position where there's a few schools, on the East Coast that were like, yo, we're interested, like, let's have a conversation. What does you coming here look like? And we started the process a little late. Because, as you know, like admissions for private schools and stuff like that, like they're making decisions and the deadlines are like December. And January, you're hearing back, right? You're getting flown in February and all this kind of stuff. And we didn't start until like cautionary, like October or whatever, like in terms of like those core conversations as to the next step. So everything was definitely like more expedited in terms of like, okay, we're doing this more seriously. But I had the conversations with, like I said, multiple schools, and it was kind of like figuring out what does this fit? Like I'm actually going to go away and go play and attend school in another country, in another space with like a whole different system.
How many offers did you end up getting in the end?
Yeah, so like for the prep schools.
For the prep schools, yeah.
So I think it was like we were talking to like 4. I mean, we reached out to kind of connect with, but I think it was ended up talking probably with like 4 or 5 coaches.
And what schools do you remember?
Oh, I mean, obviously the main one, Exeter, Phillips Exeter, which was kind of the decision. But I think we talked to Cushing, just like some of the ones in the.
You to Exeter. What was the final decision that kind of made that the school choice?
The staple where I said academics were the first and foremost thing that were, I don't want to say harped on, but like driven home, as a foundation. Like you need to do well in terms of like education, not just institutional, but like education is paramount. So finding out once we had that conversation with the coach, like, okay, well, finding out the status and the prestige of the school, and to find out, okay, well, y'all are historically a Harvard feeder, and the rival, Andover, who of course, or better than, is like the Yale feeder, and kind of exploring that, letting that sink in, and be like, okay, what? But then looking at, okay, well, you have among the longest standing rivalries, and you have, $1 billion with the B endowment. And it's a space where you have about 1,200 kids, grade 9 to grade 12 with like a post-grad year. But all in the space where like they live, and this is like a university campus, and it's international, and it's focused on like experiential learning. And it's all discussion based. Like a big class is 10, 11, maybe. I wouldn't even say 12 students. Like big classes, like 11 or 12 students, right? So the whole dynamic is different because you're sitting around an oval table, and you're having conversations. The teachers are facilitators, so they facilitate discussion and kind of shepherd the class or kind of guide us along. And so like that was very different, right? I'm a visual learner and those kind of things. So I'm like, oh, whoa, you're saying a whole lot of things that make sense. I like it. Obviously, the football situation was very positive feedback. Like there was a spot, their running back who they had brought in as a post grad. So kind of like, for Ontario reference, it'd be like the grade 13. I just left. So, I was in a spot where I definitely was going to be able to have, years there. But it really was like the academic piece that made it a standalone more than anything else, because the other schools were had solid programs and kind of had good academics and stuff like that, very much so, or great academics, not throwing shade by any means, but the degree and the distinction of kind of the environment and the culture there spoke for itself. I mean, like I was coming off, playing on Team Canada, doing well, the year before. I mean, at Exeter, everything was like really on the up and up, you know what I mean? Done well with track, both of those things were going on. Heading into the senior season where, of course, got to win state, got to win the rivalry, and wanted to compete and really do well, like in track, and had, as you said, like really set some milestones, like, this is what we're gonna do, and being on pace to that, throughout the season, talking to coaches and recruits and whatever, and the very first play of the state championship game, tearing my ACL, like it's my only fear. Period. Only fear. And it happened on the first play. And life was full stop. I went from being the fastest person on the field, period, to, I couldn't keep up with the doctor walking in the hallway to go get my knee checked out after being on the sideline. Like, very big change of pace, very, very much so a shift, like being in my headspace, right? And as I said, like I've always believed that everything happens for a reason. And very specifically, like when I was in it was probably before grade 9, but, being at Goresbrook up here, I made a point of like, I'm living with no regrets. I will have no regrets, right? And I'd watched enough stuff and being raised by single moms, at a young age, like I was exposed to like some of the older crowd, right? And so like I heard about what it's like, on the back end to, have a bunch of stuff you want to do and you didn't do it. You didn't make time for it. And so for me, when I tore my ACL, I was like, like this is a very humbling moment because, like I said this shit, you know what I mean? So I kind of have to eat it right now. I can't say stuff happens for a reason when it's going well and not also believe that, there's going to be even more work that has to happen when stuff doesn't go well. You miss out on these experiences. And if you're not intentional with that stuff, what you end up finding out you got out of it is a lot less than what it felt like the whole time. And you can't fall back on a 2-year or a 3-year practice. You know what I mean? Or you hit playoffs or whatever the case. Like, if you're not stepping out of there with more knowledge about yourself, more ability to understand how to be in a team environment, how to balance and manage your time, and how to be, unbalanced with some things, and how to be uncomfortable, or how to, like, if you don't get the core themes out of it, you just had fun and you paid to have fun, right? And it catches up with you pretty quickly after. You don't even have to graduate at university to take that. Maybe you miss classes, or there are more classes that you need to be in, and you find that out later. Or your journey's longer because, you have 6 years of academics, but you had to do 3 and 3 while you were playing ball, or like whatever it is. And so, yeah, it was a big pivot. It was a big shift. Lost some of the offers, the main ones that I was focusing on. And it was a big, like, okay, well, I got to rehab, got to get all this stuff in. I'll probably end up redshirting, which I was fine with for the first year to make sure I'm good to go. But it was like so many moving parts. And it was, literally, as I said, like it was, a stretch where I got the surgery and I was in isolation, like literally in an affirmatory bed, like had a laptop and stuff, and I was there for like a week. Yeah, like it was different. You know what I mean? I'm in isolation. I'm alone with myself, and I can only think about what's going on. And I set up this nice plan, and things were coming together, but like life happens, and so what does that actually mean for me? So again, like it's for me getting in a headspace, I'm not gonna let my circumstances limit me. I'm like, I'm still the best. Whatever, it's rehab, so I get it. And so very much so it was kind of reframing the experience, like this is something else that's just gonna have to overcome, right? And that's kind of the athlete mindset or the hustler mindset, like in any capacity, right? I mean, you have people coming up from wherever, right? And anybody that gets out of wherever they are, right, or success, like you're changing your state of being. You're getting out of something that wasn't where you wanted to be, and you're getting into a place that's better. And it takes work, and it takes being uncomfortable. So it was like, I'm really gonna have to do this. I'm really gonna, you know what I mean? Like, no one else is gonna do this for me. I'm literally like, I have to put myself in a spot where I can walk. I have to put myself in a spot where I can jog and run. That's me. That's not anybody else gonna do that. So, I was very diligent. But it's like the whole rehab process, like that's mental, right? And that's why I was so much stronger from that, because like your body will heal, but like your mind and your mindset and your attitude really is the most important part. You heal faster if you believe you're going to heal faster. You're going to be aching, whatever, if you believe that. You're not going to walk again if you believe that. Like you really got to dig. When I left Exeter as a running back, my senior year I played defensive back too. I had my choice, what position I wanted to play when I'm at the different universities that I was speaking with. And so I decided to go defense, decided to play safety, because that's kind of where I was at anyways. DB, corner, kind of like, played all over. But, found after going through that whole year, heading to spring camp, getting ready to come in and compete to start myself, my knee was sore, acting up, whatever. And so I found out that I had to get another surgery because the graft didn't heal the first time. Because being in the States, they rehabbed aggressively and had me up in there rehabbing the day after surgery. And I did everything in my power to listen to everything they were saying and do it to a T. So that was a really big reframe and a pivot again. So I'm like, I did everything to a T. Y'all told me to a T. Got my body back A1, and y'all messed this up. Right. And so it was like, that was another piece of like really digging down into the internal piece of like, the ball is in my court and I have to do something about it. The game plan really was just take a semester off, get the surgery here, and go back out there and, go back to that level. And having some talks with the coach, he was like, we want you out here. Like, you're still on track to go pro. Like, this is the coaching, this is the space you need if that's your focus. If that's not your focus, then it's more of a family decision. And so that kind of narrative, had me kind of questioning some more things because of that trade-off again and the time constraints I was away from home for like 4 years, right? My little brother had just been born, and like I'm missing kind of a bunch of those critical pieces, and I lived away and went through all those things on a solo mission, right? So it was a lot of experience, but then it was like, ended up coming to SMU, the Sobey School of Business, first and foremost, the dean, Pat Bradshaw. You know, she was kind of what drew me in because she has a big commitment on community and entrepreneurship and positive impact. So it was like, boom, going into a place where, you know, all of a sudden, not as Simon Fraser, but I can still play football at a high level, still do what I want, you know, have the opportunity to really focus on the business, you know, and I kind of came back quicker on that surgery than I should have per se, but I ended up playing at East West in the All-Star game because they didn't reclass me. So I got what ended up being an early invite to the All-Star game after playing like 1 year at Canadian safety, which was much different than an American safety because the field's way bigger, as you know. But like a lot of moving, right? And so that's what I mean. Like even at every step, like I'm like, okay, well, the game plan was always be the best, but that keeps looking different, and life keeps hitting, and you have to keep pivoting. And kind of speaking about it now, I can breeze through it, whatever. But that shit's hard as hell. I mean, I had a game plan, and I did everything in my power to control that. You know, control freak, whatever. I made sure that I did where I needed to be, and I was, and doing the things that needed to be done. And still, stuff doesn't happen the way you want it to happen because that's part of life, right? And so then the game really becomes how quickly can you adjust? How quickly can you bounce back? So for me, that whole experience of the ACL, you know, ingrained the resilience, right? I already had that kind of piece, but I'm like, it's whatever. Something's going to happen, and I'm going to have to actively make a decision to overcome what's going to happen because I'm in a driver's seat. Nobody else can make me walk again. Nobody else can do these things. And so it's like, that's kind of what it comes back to. Like, whatever it's an injury, like I still was able to play at a higher level after the second time I had to get it done. And not necessarily from all those pieces, right? But it's like, you have to keep pivoting, right? I mean, I ended up walking away from football to focus on building the business because the value and the time wasn't matching up. The opportunity cost was picking up in a way that I wasn't cool and comfortable with it staying at.
And that's when it became a family decision.
Right, and then that's where, you know, leaving the Simon Fraser, even playing SMU, where I'm, you know, still playing at, you know, a high level, whatever the case is, considering going pro. But then I'm like, you know, I already have this stuff going on, and it's really, my love has become an Achilles heel, and that's not a fun space to be in because I hadn't questioned it too much before. I mean, you grow up loving ball, it's fun, it's enjoyable, then it can, you know what I mean, it can start to pay for school and these other things, right? But like, it's a tool. And so it's like, you know, the reality is that in sports, especially once you get out of this Pee-wee stuff, and even in the Pee-wee stuff, adults know there's politics and everything, right? And somebody's posture, or somebody wants to make money from you or get whatever. So there's a benefit, right? And so the reality is that why I'm saying in terms of the intentional piece is like, somebody's making money to have you come to their school. Somebody's making money to have you play for them. They're getting paid because of that. And so if they don't value you as a person, if they don't value the squad or whatever the case is, and if you're not tangibly getting something, if you don't walk away a little bit better, not just in football, if you don't walk away with more knowledge, more access, more something, they're winning over you. You're not both winning. And so you end up in a space where, okay, you can spend 2 years at a school and have a great football time, but what else? Like athletes don't, like we get bad branding, you know what I'm saying? Because we're supposed to be jocks or like whatever, right? You have to bust your ass more. You have less time to study. You have less time to do all these other things, and the expectations on you are higher because you have to maintain a certain GPA. You have to maintain going to practice. You have to maintain going to class. Regular students don't have to do any of that thing. And so it's like, if you're in a space where you're just going through these motions because somebody said that, oh, it's good to have you on a team and you feel good being around the boys and like, you know, the game plan was go pro. No, you better be the best because at the end of whatever that window is and when it closes, you didn't have the same opportunity. Unless it was your focus intentionally, you did not have the same opportunity as anybody else at the university, right? I've played, you know, in 2 different countries, traveled, you know what I mean, different states, especially living on the West Coast. I haven't seen, you know what I mean, the cities and the towns and gone out and explored and hung out with people and spent all the time in the city. I was training and doing football. You know what I mean? You're traveling on a team with your team, like with the rest of with the coaches, with everybody else. Like you miss out on these experiences. And if you're not intentional with that stuff, what you end up finding out you got out of it is a lot less than what it felt like the whole time. It's looking to the outside world a whole lot different, right? I mean, I started this like 8.5 years ago with the vision of, you know, creating a platform that bridges the disconnect between youth and each other, youth in their community, and youth in industry. So like that's kind of broad. But like the reason really very much so that I'm making a point of that as the emphasis is that, as we spoke about earlier, right? Like the reality is that nobody has the same foundation, right? The level of support that you get is something that we can control as people go through these transitional periods of change. So whether it's a relationship change, a home change, moving around, going to schools, right? So for me, like I've had 20 years of education. I've been to 10 different schools. I had to stop, start, restart, make new friends, you know what I mean? Start new teams, like all of that, a lot. Right? And that's part of life. But the reality is that if you don't have the supports at some of these different periods, right? If you don't understand that, you know, making friends within the first 3 months of going into a space is important to you feeling whole, right? And feeling like you want to stay somewhere. Or, you know, if you're not aware of what it feels like to be triggered and what your response is generally like when you're triggered, you end up doing routines and you end up in these spaces where you're on autopilot and people are not the drivers action, you know, based in their own life, right? They're not in the driver's seat. And so for me, it was very much like, that's why I started Infinitus. So I'm like, yo, everybody has limitless potential, right? And that's what the mission is, right? Empowering youth, individuals, and communities to embrace their limitless potential. Because everyone has the skills, the unique insight, the gift. Like it looks different depending on everybody, right? But everyone has these things. And the reality is that more often than not, you don't get to celebrate these things or explore these things because your circle has told you it's unrealistic. Or people in your sphere are like, oh, I've never seen that done before. It doesn't make sense. And so if we don't stretch outside of this, if we don't see the bigger picture, if we're not challenged, if we don't get exposure to network or any of these things, we end up missing out. Not because we're making an active choice, but because we're not being supported and we're not learning how we can get, receive, and support ourselves. And so for me, like that's really what it was, right? It's changing the whole, the mindset and the attitude, because you can't just say, yo, I want you to do better, be better, go ahead and do that. Or we're talking at people, right? It's actually being in the spaces. So with us in Infinitus, you know, it really is about, you know, shifting that headspace and providing a framework. So, you know, we do obviously events and training and learning. So whether it's, you know, mentoring and facilitation and some consulting work, you know, dealing with youth, whether it's, you know, in elementary all the way through post-secondary and university and things of that nature, you know, or in community groups, like, I mean, or you know, also dealing with government, right, and community organizations and nonprofits as well as private sector. Like, you know, we're definitely touching on a bunch of different pieces. But the pillars and the core of everything we do, right, is focusing on identity, resiliency, leadership, mental health, right, and there's all that overlap, right? And then you throw leadership on top of that because everybody is a leader on their own way. But again, it looks different. And so, you know, it's building those abilities, whether it's with youth or on teams or as an entrepreneur or an individual or organizations or governments. Like it's being able to leverage the value in the room, in the space already, not recreating the wheel, right? Everybody has different degrees of access to the resources that's their network. And it's figuring out how we can leverage what you do have and what you already have been doing to be able to put you in a space to where you can build your portfolio tangibly, not just having a conversation about let's build your digital entrepreneurship mindset and your lens. What's important to you? Like, what's your end goal? You know, are you trying to put your moms in a house? Are you trying to get a car? Are you trying to start a family? Like, what are you trying to do? And so what is your North Star? Because being able to have a North Star, you know, being able to have reason and justification for something changes how you perceive what's going on, right? If you have a reason for something, it's no longer suffering. You're able to get through it because it's a reason, it's with purpose, it's the journey. And so that's really a big, you know, piece of the work that we're doing, you know, whether it's with the media or the consulting or the facilitation in the schools or in the government or, you know, coaching. Like with, you know, the full range is really about, you know, putting people in the driver's seat and enabling them to understand that there are so many tools in this digital space, right, that you have access to, but you need to be intentional and you need to be focused on putting yourself in the driver's seat, because everybody's North Star, whether you're aware of it or not, you know, there are pieces that pull you. You're pulled towards doing something, you know, this work or having these conversations or pulled away from these groups. And so it's really just being more curious about those things and having more conversations and getting out of your comfort zone. But what does that look like? So, you know, with Infinitus and the programming and the work, you know, it is about creating these spaces that focuses on experiential learning. and focuses on, you know, the peer dynamic, to where we're putting people in positions to feel comfortable and to feel confident. And as they build, whether it's digital literacy or, you know, entrepreneurship or any of these pieces, like, they're comfortable, right? No, people don't want to talk about financial literacy or, you know, how to use your phones and stuff like that, because they feel like they should already know the answers. You should already know how to do that, right? But how do you hold a space for people to be curious and ask questions and grow and challenge? Right? People slip through the cracks the whole way through. And as I've kind of gone into it, like, it's shifted, like, people are swept through the cracks. And it starts at the youth, at the youngest age, and it goes all the way through life, right? Whether it's academically, athletically, professionally, socially, whatever. If your needs are not being met and you don't know how to ask for help and you don't know how to meet those needs strategically, intentionally, whatever it looks like, you're going to miss out. And so for me, it's really a matter of, I'm visual. So a skyscraper, right? The most important part of any building, of the skyscraper specifically, is the foundation. They're going up all kinds of high, right? These are the tallest buildings. And without that foundation, you can't build. You can't keep growing and learning. So as a person, if you don't have that foundation, if your needs aren't being met in certain whatever ways and you're not even aware of it, sure, it'll work. But when you tear your ACL, or when you have 3 major surgeries, or when you move to 10 different schools, like, eventually these things are going to catch up with you and you have to deal with what's going on. And if you don't have a foundation at that point, when things are getting rickety and the wind's blowing, right, the table will, things will topple over. And so for me, like, that's at its core what Infinus is about, right? It's providing that framework and that roadmap to enable people, right, to embrace their limitless potential. And it looks different. So, I've been doing that for the last 8 years. Over the last 5 years, it's already been, we've engaged with over 3,000 people, which is sweet because it's, age 6 to, being generous, 55 plus, But, it started off 8 years ago, like, dealing with young Black boys, grades 3 and 4, talking about role models, mentors, the difference and why they're important, but to start seeing yourself as a brand. Because you can be the class clown, and I did it. But at the end of the day, it's still your name on that test. It's still you getting a report card. It's still you having to do an interview for the job, or getting in trouble at home when your friend was the person that told you to do it. Doesn't matter, right? And so starting to take that accountability and that responsibility is very important. And